Welcome to this second session in the series I call The Power of Women in Scripture. In the last session we talked about Deborah. She was the only woman of the 12 judges, and the story is taking place during the period of the judges, and God is speaking only to Deborah. And so when Deborah speaks, others are listening. It's in a form of irony. The women are playing the role of men, and we saw some wonderful things in the last session. I didn't tell you how it ended, so I'm going to do that now, because that ending is in chapter 5, which is it's the second telling of the story of Deborah. The first telling is in chapter 4, which is in a narrative form and was undoubtedly written during the period of the monarchy looking back. It's in a narrative form, it adds some details, and the whole purpose, of course, was to unite the tribes to work together in a united monarchy. This session we're going to work on the Song of Deborah in chapter 5. It's done in a poetic form, there's rhythm, and it's going to bring to life with this incredible imagery the story of Jael, who plays, in fact, she turns out to be the heroine of this whole story. But I need to tell you how the story ended. The poem in chapter 5 tells us that Sisera, you remember Sisera's leading the enemy army, and they had all those chariots. That Sisera called together all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, and all the people who were with him. And so here is this huge army of Canaanites with these iron chariots, and you see this. This is an etching in stone, actually in Egypt. So it's an Egyptian chariot, but it'll give you the sense of how mighty this army was, and they were down in the Jezreel Valley flat where the chariots could maneuver. And Deborah is saying, you know, God is going to deliver these into your hands. How possibly is this victory going to happen? Well, let's read in the poem, and it's in that poetic rhythm of the Hebrew poetry. The stars fought from heaven, from their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent of Kishon swept them away, the ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. Wow, Kishon is a river. It's a dry riverbed. It's in the Jezreel Valley. I mean, chariots have no trouble going back and forth across this dry riverbed, but apparently there was a heavy rainfall up in the hill country. The water came pouring down, gushed into that river, and the iron wheels of the chariots got stuck in the mud. That's what it tells us. This is a wonderful picture. It was taken back in the 70s, and the Egged tour bus, and it's caught in one of these dry riverbeds, and look at the kids pushing as hard as they can push to try to get the bus out of the dry riverbed that turned into water. And that's exactly, in fact, what happened to the battle. Now, the whole story is told with this irony, women playing the role of men. Sisera is the commanding general of the enemy. He didn't get killed in the battle. And it tells us that he escaped on foot. And he ran away from the battle. But first we have to meet Jael. She's our heroine. And this is that victory song of the women. Let me just explain this, because, and look at me laughing, because the whole thing is ironic. The whole story is ironic, women playing the role of men, trying to encourage the men, you see, to rise up, to be part of the united monarchy. In Israel, the battle would have been very close to where the different tribes were located. It's not like our country today, where our men fight in Afghanistan and Vietnam and Korea. They fight in places that are so far away. The women are not intimately connected. Of course, we're more intimately connected now because there's the television and the news on the television, but there's not that closeness. You know, I was reading a book about the Revolutionary War. It's called an historical novel. In other words, it's based on history, but the characters kind of, are turned into, they're fictitious characters and a lot of things added. And the women, many of the women would follow their men to battle. They would cook for them because, they weren't fighting all the time. They would cook for them, they would mend their clothes, many things they could do. And when it came time for the battle, they were like on the edges of the battle. They were not in the battle themselves, but after the battle, if their men did not return, they would go out onto the battlefield because people who were wounded would be lying. And if they found their man and he was wounded, they would bring him back to try to give him medical care. If he was dead, what they would do is they would go out and they would plunder everything from the dead enemy soldiers. And that's exactly what the women did in Israel. I mean, they were close to the battle. So when the battle was done, the women had this incredible victory song. And to meet Jael, I'm going to go back and forth between chapter 4, which is the narrative, and chapter 5. But let's meet Jael in the poetic form. And it says, "Most blessed of women is Jael, the wife of Hever the Kenite. Most blessed is she of women in the tent." And you hear the rhythm, and the rhythm is going to build this emotion. Well, she is wife of Hever the Kenite. Guess what? Hever the Kenite never appears in the story. Just like Deborah's husband, Lapidot, never appears in the story either. It's all part of the irony. She is a woman of the tent. She is a Bedouin woman. And you can see the Bedouin today. I think you get, in Israel, you get a sense of the life of these Bedouin. And we have to ask, though, who were the Kenites and what were the Bedouins doing? I mean, how was she there, close to the battle there in Israel? Well, we read about the Kenites in the book of Judges, and it says that the descendants of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up from the city of palms with the sons of Judah. Well, back in the Exodus account, Moses' father-in-law was Yitro. Jethro. He was a Midianite. He was a priest of the Midianites. He lived in the Sinai. He lived in tents. He was a Bedouin, and Moses married his daughter. Zipporah married his daughter, and so these Kenites aligned themselves with the Israelites. And when the Israelites went into the Promised Land, they came too. They went up from the city of palms. That's Jericho, up into the hill country of Judah. Well, these Kenites were apparently close to the battle. So let's take a look at a map here at just what's going on. We see the Kishon River, which is where the battle took place, and you see the location of the battle, not too far from Megiddo. The Kenites had pitched their tents probably just in that corner of the Jezreel Valley, which is out of the way of the trade route, out of the way of all the activity, and they would have been very close. Sisera fled on foot from the Kishon River, the site of the battle, over to the tent of Jael, the Kenites. Now we can get a wonderful picture of Jael and just what was happening. She was the only one in the tent. Nobody else was there. No men were around. She was the only one there. If you want to learn about the Bedouin, there's a wonderful location. It's called the Jael Center that is preserving understanding and knowledge of the Bedouin culture. Today, the Bedouins, you see the Bedouins, they still live in their tent. The government of Israel has tried to move them into big apartment complexes. They won't go. Or if there's some kind of a building, they'll pitch their tent outside of the building. So you see them still in their tents, but outside of the tent is a car, and there's a TV antenna rising up, okay? So the Bedouin culture is definitely changing. It's being influenced by the modern world. But the Jael Center has preserved what that Bedouin life was like. Jael came from England. He was a Jew. He spent much time in Israel before World War II, during the 30s. And he got to know the Bedouin. They kind of accepted him. And as a result, he took everything that he had, donated it. It's now in a kibbutz not too far from Beersheba. And what we see here is a photograph of his that he took way back, during the 30s, and it's wonderful. You get a real picture of the Bedouin life, and their animals, the goats, and the women dressed in all covered, and so forth. He was apparently accepted by the Bedouin and was able to live with them for a period of time. And in the Jael Center, you can see they've got displays of things that he actually collected, and it gives you a sense of the life. Here's a picture of the water jugs. Of course, they're living out in the desert, and they go from water hole to water hole. And here's the carrier. It would be carried on the back of the camel, and there are the water jugs that would be carried on the back of the camel, because water was life, of course, in the desert. In the next picture, we see some things from the life of the women, because Jael, of course, was a woman. There are cooking implements here, and then there's also a photograph of a woman weaving, and of course, all the materials had to be made. Now, in the story, Sisera is fleeing on foot, and he comes to the tent of Jael. Jael is turning out to be the heroine of the story, and I want to go back to this word of prophecy that we read, where, remember Barak, Deborah had said to Barak, you know, God says that you're going to go and you're going to fight the battle, and Barak says, I don't know, Deborah. You know, I mean, they're awfully strong, I don't know, but maybe if you go with me, I'll go too. And what does Deborah say? Deborah, speaking for God, says, I will surely go with you, nevertheless, the honor shall not be yours on the journey that you are about to take, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hands of a woman. And at the time we're reading it, we think it's going to be Deborah, but it's turning out to be Jael. So let's take a look here at the situation at the time of Jael. It's being told by the women in this victory song. And actually, this part here is in the victory song. Let's take a look. I want you to hear the poem. I want you to hear the rhythm. I'm going to try to read it with the rhythm. And you're going to hear repetition. The ear would have heard the repetition. You're going to get a visual picture of totally empty. Up in the hill country where the children of Israel live, everything's empty. The fields are empty. Everything is deserted because the Canaanites, the enemy, have totally come in to control them. Let's hear the song. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anat, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted, and travelers went by roundabout ways. The peasantry ceased. They ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose, until I arose a mother of Israel. So this gives you the picture of the desolation of the time. And now, the next picture I'm going to show you is one of my absolutely favorite pictures. My husband took it when actually we were at the Jael Center, and they're a Bedouin who work there, and they set up a tent, and you go and you can meet these Bedouin, and the women are on their side of the tent, the men are on their side of the tent, the women are doing women activities, the men are sitting and smoking and talking. And you can talk to these women. My husband took a picture of one of the women on the women's side of the tent. And here's the picture. This, in my mind, is Jael. Look at the way she's giving that look over her shoulder. And it's a Bedouin woman. She's got that little sly smile. Can't you just see her? You know, as Sisera is approaching on foot, and she's thinking to herself, oh, this is the enemy. I know what I'm going to do with the enemy. You can just see it. It's just a wonderful picture. Now, Jael is going to play different roles. The first role she's going to play the role of a seductress. She's going to seduce Sisera into her side of the tent. You see, she can't go into the men's side, but she'll seduce him into her side of the tent. Now, men don't go into the women's side of the tent. Absolutely, it is forbidden. But Sisera is fleeing from the enemy on foot, and he's got to go somewhere. And once she gets him into her side of the tent, we're going to see what happens. All right, so we're hearing now about Jael, the seductress. Now Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Hever the Kenite, who's not there. The men's side of the tent is empty. Nobody's there but Jael. And Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, turn aside, my master. Turn aside to me. Oh, do you recognize it? This is what the prostitute says to the men. Come into my house, I will take care of you. That's the Hebrew term, turn aside. That's used with the prostitute, you know, who's luring the men of Israel into the ways of idolatry and harlotry. And that's what she's doing with Sisera. Now, let me show you a picture here of the tent that's at the Jael Center. As you approach it, the first part is the women's side. It's smaller than the men's side. It's where all the activity is taking place, of the women. They're cooking, they're weaving, they're doing all kinds of female activity, all right? And the women are over there. And then as you go along, the men's side is quite large. It's luxurious. It has rugs, it has cushions, they're smoking, they're having a wonderful time. And so it would have been one tent, and there would have been no one else but Jael there, and she seduced him into her side. And this next picture is one of the women there in that women's side of the tent doing her activities, and this is what it would have looked like in the women's side of the tent. So Jael played the role of a seductress. Turn aside, my master. The next role she's going to play the role of a mother. And this is just so ironic because men leave their mothers. They become men. And the wives don't treat them, I mean, they're men. The women aren't, coddling them anymore. But Jael becomes a woman. This is the second role. Now listen here. And first we're going to read it in its narrative form in chapter 4. And Sisera said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink. Then she covered him. Well, he asked for water, she gave him milk. Curdled milk is very typical of the Bedouin culture, and it relaxes you, and it puts you to sleep. And he lay down and she covered him. Can't you see the mother covering the little baby in the crib? She covered him. Now let's look at the same account in the poetic form. He asked her for water, she gave him milk. In a magnificent bowl she brought him curds. The curds is the milk, the curds. And here's a picture of an artifact that is referred to as a milk bowl. And I mean, it's a little bit later than the time of the judges, but it would have been very similar. This would have been the kind of a bowl. She would have carried him this bowl with the curdled milk, and he would have felt relaxed after the battle. He would have been very tired. He would have lied down. She would have put a cover over him. So Jael is playing three roles. We've already seen the role of seductress, and we've seen where she said, "Turn aside to me." We've seen the role of the mother. She covered him with a rug. She gave him curdled milk. Now we're going to see her third role. She becomes the warrior. She is a heroine because she's going to be the warrior that defeats the enemy. Now, and you remember the prophecy, God sold Sisera into the hands of a woman. How is she going to be the warrior? Well, first of all, before she's the warrior, we're going to set the stage, because in the poem we have Sisera saying to her, "Stand in the doorway of the tent, and it shall be if anyone comes and inquires of you and says, 'Is there anyone here?' that you shall say no." Well, who's going to be coming? The Israeli army is going to be coming. Some of the soldiers, they're chasing Sisera. They're looking for him. They're going to kill him. But Sisera says, "Stand in the door. If anyone comes and says, 'Is anyone here?' say, 'No, no one's here. No one's here.'" So he's hiding in the women's side of the tent, and he feels completely safe. All right? Now, what does Jael do? We read first she reached out her hand for the tent peg. That's going to be in the left hand. What is the tent peg? The tent peg is a woman's tool. It's her job to put up the tent, all right? She reached out her hand for the tent peg and her right hand for the workman's hammer. That's the one that would put in the tent peg, right? Then she struck Sisera. She smashed his head, and she shattered and pierced his temple. She's the warrior. She has just killed the enemy. And we just read it in its poetic form, but it's going to get even better. Listen, because what follows in the poetry is, the imagery is just so incredible. I don't know how to explain it. Because the men, when they were in battle, would rape the women. That was accepted. They won the battle, they would rape the women. The imagery here is of Jael raping Sisera. Now, she's not doing it literally. It's all in the poetic imagery. And who is singing the song? The women are singing the song. Listen what it is. Between her feet he bowed, he fell, he lay. Between her feet he bowed, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell dead. Is it wonderful? It's absolutely wonderful. Jael is now, she's the warrior. And the victor, the warrior who has won the battle by just getting the tent peg down in his head, now gets the spoils of the victory, which is to rape the men. That's exactly what it is. It's the irony of the story. Now what we're going to do is we're going to shift gears. We're going to leave Jael and we're going to go to Sisera's mother. Sisera's mother is back in the powerful wall city of Hatzor. We don't see her clearly. We see her behind a lattice window. So she's fuzzy. We can't quite see her. And she's expecting her son to come back a victor. And here's what we read. It's in that poetic form. The women are singing this song. Out of the window she looked and lamented, the mother of Sisera through the lattice. Why does his chariot delay in coming? Why do the hoofbeats of his chariots tarry? Where is he? Where's my son? He should have won the battle. Why is he taking so long? And then we read, are they not finding? Are they not dividing the spoil? A maiden, 2 maidens for every warrior. See, she's expecting her son as the victor to have ravished all the women and to come back with all this spoil. Now what we get is a play on words. This is just, it's so incredible. I love Hebrew poetry. And this is the song of the women, just knowing that the women are doing this. There is a word that sounds, 2 words, they sound the same. One of them ends with an ein, the other one ends with an aleph. Both of those letters are given the sound ah, but they're different letters. But they're pronounced exactly the same. We have tseva, with an aleph at the end, meaning the embroidered work of women. The other one is tseva, with an aleph at the end, which means the heavenly host of God, the army of God, the powerful army of God. Now let's listen to the victory song of the women. And I'm going to do it in English, and you have to, when I read embroidered work or embroidery or something like that, that's the play on words between the women's embroidered work and the heavenly host of God. To Sisera, a spoil of dyed work, that's our tseva, a spoil of dyed work embroidered, dyed work of the double embroidery on the neck of the spoiler. You don't get it in English. In the Hebrew, it's so funny because she's expecting her son to be like the king. The king is Yabin, the son of God, and his army is like the heavenly host of the pagan god, and he's going to come back the victor. And he's going to come back with the embroidered work of the women, when in fact, he's running away on foot from the battle to the tent of Jael. Now, I think what's important here is that we, reading the story, realize that there are 2 decisions we make, and we make them all the time, every day in our lives. The first is we can turn aside, and that imagery is to turn aside away from God to the ways of the world. The world seduces us every day, every minute. The alternative is to stand. And we stand for God, which is a commitment to God. That is the choice, and that is what the story is saying. And you see, there's always this decision, and we get it in the poem. Listen to the poem. My heart goes out to the leaders of Israel, the volunteers among the people, bless the Lord. You have 2 things. You have the leaders of Israel and you have the volunteers. Because there are 2 requirements in a battle. The first requirement is that there have to be leaders. There were leaders of Israel. Who were the leaders? Well, let's take a look here at the map. You remember that Deborah in Ephraim called Barak from the tribe of Naphtali up in the hills. Naphtali and Zebulun were the leaders. They were the ones who answered the call, formed the army, had the courage to go up to the top of Mount Tabor with the army down below with all their chariots with confidence that God was going to be the victor. They were the leaders. once the battle started, and it looked like Israel was going to turn the tide and win, guess what happened? 4 other tribes came in and joined the battle. And we see them here. Yisachar, Manasseh, the tribe of Ephraim, where Deborah was, came in and joined the battle, and Benjamin, they joined the battle. But guess what? No, well, first of all, let me explain. Those who joined the battle were what it says, the people volunteered willingly. So the leaders come first, then there are those who follow. Now, all of us in our Christian walk are not leaders. God will call those who are leaders. If he calls you as a leader, act as a leader. But you don't necessarily have to be a leader. It's not required. What is required, that if you're not a leader, you will be a volunteer that follows willingly. Now that word for volunteered willingly is the same word as the free will offering in ancient Israel. The free will offering was given out of the love of your heart. You didn't sin, you weren't asking for forgiveness. There was no other reason except you loved God so much that you gave the free will offering, and that's what is required for the volunteer who give themselves as free will offering. So there are 3 responses to God's call. The 2 tribes were called and answered, Naphtali and Zebulun. Tribes that joined the battle when victory was in sight were Ephraim, Benjamin, Manasseh, and Yisachar. And then there were those that failed to join the battle. Part of Reuven and Gilead, Dan and Ships, and Asher on the seashore. So this is a wonderful story. You need to get the whole imagery of it first, and yet Jael come alive in your mind, and the mother of Sisera, and Sisera going on foot into the women's side of the tent. But then remember, it's giving us a wonderful message. And we do need to make that decision in our lives on a daily basis. If we're called to be leaders, we lead. And if not, we volunteer willingly out of the love of our hearts for God.